All right, welcome to the February 6th meeting of the Human Services Committee. Can we please take a roll?
Okay. Councilmember Harris? Councilmember Reed?
Here.
Councilmember Ravel?
Here.
Councilmember Burns?
Here.
Councilmember Harricars?
Here. That we have a quorum, we're ready to begin our business. Let's first start with HS1, the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of December 5th, 2022. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Let's take a voice vote on that one. For approval of the minutes, HS1.
Was there a second?
Yes.
Sorry.
Approval of the minutes, HS1?
Aye.
Voice vote? Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. Those minutes are approved. Let's move on to HS2, approval of minutes for the regular meeting of January 3rd, 2023.
So moved.
Seeing that we have a second, let's take a voice vote again. Aye. For approval, and then, so we've approved the minutes for the 23rd. Now we will begin public comment. We have 13? 10. So we will begin public comment with folks that have signed up and are in the room. And everyone can have, we'll say, 3 minutes. Is Don Ziegler come to the podium?
Good evening, members of the Health and Human Services Committee. I'm Don Ziegler, Chair of the Evanston Health Advisory Council and Chair of the Illinois Advocacy Committee of the American Heart Association, and adjunct professor at UIC School of Public Health. On January 3rd, I spoke before this committee in opposition to Evanston amending its city ordinances to allow cannabis smoking establishments. I stated that it would be unwise and surely undercut public health, the city's indoor air policies, and reduce achievement of our 5-year E-Plan, which pledges to advance health and racial equity. My comments then were based on rapidly growing science. The American Lung Association emphatically states that no one should be exposed to secondhand marijuana smoke. The Tobacco Control Legal Consortium clearly states that allowing marijuana smoking in places where smoking is now prohibited will undermine laws that protect the public from exposure to secondhand smoke. This is based on CDC, which indicates that creating allowances for cannabis smoking or vaping in public settings will expose non-cannabis users to secondhand cannabis byproducts, which contain many of the same toxic and cancer-causing chemicals found in tobacco smoke and contain some in even higher amounts. Moreover, there is public perception, particularly among youth, that cannabis smoking is less harmful and more socially acceptable than tobacco. Lessened perceived risk may well result in earlier age of use, a greater frequency of use, and reduced motivation to cease or reduce use. We also know that chronic cannabis use, particularly in adolescents, is associated with deficits in cognitive functioning and brain development, psychosis, schizophrenia, and increased risk of motor vehicle accidents. Why would Evanston want to take action that would reverse our hard-fought public health strategies? In conclusion, I've submitted to staff a letter signed by over a dozen prominent Evanston residents, including reputable health professionals, the American Heart Association, and the Respiratory Health Association, all strongly urging that the Human Services Committee vote no and not allow cannabis lounges in Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Derek Cabrera.
Evening, council members. Thank you for your time. I'll keep this very short. My name is Derek Cabrera. I'm the Community Advocacy Director from the American Heart Association. And we're just basically here to echo Don as one of the organizations that has signed on to the sign-on letter. We strongly urge that the committee think this through and not allow that this ordinance be passed. As a national organization, obviously, we're against anything that has to do with smoke. Smoke-free in Illinois has been around, as of this week now, 15 years, and we prefer that it stay that way. And we have no stance against cannabis. It's just a matter of just smoke-free, just to make that clear. So we definitely hope that the committee reviews this, sees that our sign-on letter, the experts that in both our organization and others, and look forward to seeing your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Janet Kirby.
Hi, I'm Janet Kirby, and I'm a resident of Evanston's First Ward. I'm also a practicing physician. I'm speaking as a board-certified psychiatrist to express my strong opposition to any allowance of an establishment where cannabis can be smoked or otherwise used recreationally in any form in public. Psychiatrists are generally concerned about the liberalization and expansion of marijuana use because we are uniquely informed about its adverse effects on the brain, including the developing brain. And the brain is still developing into the late 20s. In fact, the last networks to mature are those that facilitate good judgment, self-regulation, more sophisticated manipulation of information, and other brain skills we need adult members of our society to possess if we are to survive as a civilization. Let's call them the wisdom networks. The American Psychiatric Association has stated positions on the need to monitor and assess the public health consequences of these policy changes in states where marijuana has been legalized. The APA also has a position in opposition to the use of cannabis as medication. I've attached those position statements and also a letter from Dr. Karen Pierce, chair of the Illinois Psychiatric Society's Committee on Youth, a well-researched letter with scientific references co-signed by a number of psychiatrists and submitted to the Illinois legislature as public record in opposition to the legalization of marijuana when that was initially at issue a few years ago. All the same arguments still apply to any further liberalization of cannabis use. Allowing cannabis lounges in Evanston would essentially be an advertisement for the normalization and expansion of marijuana use. Evanston being a college town and most college students possessing fake ID cards, we can safely assume 18-year-olds and some even younger would be entering these establishments. While many are already partaking in private, having a lounge where you can just show up, use, and meet others will make it even easier and more attractive and potentially expand the number of marijuana users and the risk to vulnerable brains, our next generation of America. THC, the part that gets you high, is toxic to growing brains, and adolescent brain growth continues to age 25 years and beyond. We call them emerging adults. Brain changes can include lower IQ, an increased risk of developing major depression, including a 3 times greater risk of attempting suicide. It can precipitate incidental psychosis, worsen pre-existing psychosis, and contribute to the development of chronic psychotic disorders in genetically vulnerable individuals. Regular cannabis use can produce the well-known amotivational syndrome, lowering school and work performance, and can paradoxically lead to anxiety and sleep difficulties, which then create a vicious circle of dependence. Cannabis actually changes sleep architecture, and reactive sleep problems are a main reason people trying to abstain from cannabis relapse. Some adults can get away with using a little pot now and then. Emerging adults can't, and those with as yet not well understood genetic vulnerabilities really can't. I see emerging adults. I see the effects of marijuana up close. Marijuana is not benign. Please let this idea die in this committee tonight.
Thank you. Next up, we have Matthew Brewer.
Good afternoon. I'm Matt Brewer. I represent a group that is considering opening a dispensary in Evanston, or at least applying to open a dispensary in Evanston. I thought it would be useful here to provide a perspective on, one, how the industry, how Illinois' laws in particular address a lot of the concerns that are arising around consumption, but then also to talk about the opportunity that we think consumption could present. And so A little bit of background. I have been involved in cannabis in Illinois since 2014 when the state announced it was legalizing medical. I was part of a team that opened a dispensary back then in 2015, one of the first in the state. We went through this most recent round of licenses, and I'm part of a group, me and my family, that have the so-called social equity licenses. And we're opening our first one next week in Chicago, another one soon after that, and hopefully coming to Evanston. And what we always see is that we come, as part of the process, rightfully so, we come in, we meet with the community. Our approach is to try to become a part of the community and work on issues together. But there's some objections that are really rooted in opposition to legalization of cannabis, and that's a completely different conversation. Some of the concerns that we've heard here today are less about consumption lounge and more about disagreeing with legalization and the impacts of cannabis. And so crime generally goes down. If you walk into a dispensary, and the same is true for what would be a consumption establishment, they are some of the most regulated spaces you can ever be in. It's like being in a casino. The number of cameras, the security that has insight into every angle of the space is unlike just about any other business operation. And so I know that when we talk about consumption, we think kind of broadly about the worst case scenario, being in someone's basement. This is not what a consumption establishment would be anywhere in Illinois, and particularly here in Evanston. The last thing I'll say is that I understood that an argument or a position that it doesn't advance equity. And I think it's true that consumption could be passed in a way that does not advance equity. And so I would encourage the committee to think about ways where it could. Consumption is on the way in Illinois. Evanston would potentially be one of the first. And because it's a newer industry, it could create an opportunity to achieve equity in a way where the broader industry has not. And so with that, I thank you for your time and respectfully submit.
Thank you. Next up, we have, I think it's C. Louise Brown.
Good evening, council members. I am C. Louise Brown, a resident of Evanston's 8th Ward for well over 30 years. As a registered professional nurse, I've been instrumental in working over the years in several service organizations, the faith community, and in the Evanston city government. My aim in my public health career and in all my service opportunities has been to help Evanston maintain its reputation to bring knowledge and information to our citizens for their good health through the lifespan. I am here to oppose the adoption of the ordinance to allow an indoor smoking lounge for cannabis. My opposition is about clean air. It's not about consumption. It's clean air. I have always prided myself in Evanston's commitment for the protection of our citizens from dangers seen and unseen. Studies have proven, and you've heard tonight, that inhaled indoor air in closed settings is dangerous to the health of everybody, all beings. In the past, Evanston has been in the forefront of passing smoke-free air ordinances. We were among the first communities in the United States to pass such laws, and we fought with the tobacco industry to develop and maintain these laws with our citizens. Now, here we are in the 21st century, considering an ordinance to bring another harm to the health of our neighbors and yours and mine. Let's put the brakes on this before it gets any further. Please stand for the rights of our community to be protected in all situations that do not harm, degrade, demoralize our citizens. Please be concerned about dangers unseen as well as you are about dangers that are seen. Do the right thing for the persons who are depending upon you to protect them from all of these dangers. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next up, we have Allison Dixon.
Chair. Chair, do you want to announce maybe 2 people at a time, or?
After Allison, we'll have Christopher Birkinshaw.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm here actually to change it up a bit. I'm going to be talking about agenda item HS9, the ordinance to establish Evanston's Fair Work Week ordinance. Good evening. Thank you, members of the committee, Mayor Biss. My name is Allison Dixon. I am a longtime Evanston resident and homeowner, a graduate of ETHS, and a mother of a Nichols student. I also work as a senior instructor in the School of Labor and Employment Relations at the University of Illinois and an affiliate researcher with the U of I Project for Middle Class Renewal. My research centers on the modern-day degradation of job quality, especially the impacts of precarious working conditions and variable and unpredictable work schedules on worker health, well-being, families, and communities throughout Illinois. I'm the author of a number of research reports and policy briefs related to issues facing Illinois workers, and I have provided expert testimony on many occasions to both the Illinois Legislative Assembly and the Chicago City Council. I was also recently awarded a fellowship with the Aspen Institute to further my work understanding the intersections between job quality and the future of work in our cities. The Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, was implemented over 85 years ago to standardize and limit weekly work hours for employees by disincentivizing employers from setting long work weeks. It was not equipped to curb the unstable, unpredictable, or inadequate work hours endemic to the more recently changing structure of jobs and labor markets in the 21st century. The intensified pursuit of labor cost reduction, facilitated by technology, has led to more work becoming variable or last minute in certain sectors. This has sparked a grassroots response that has led to nascent policy innovations such as Fair Work Week legislation, which aim to create new minimum standards for the employment relationship and to curb associated risks to aspects of workers' well-being. Research shows that while worker pay is critical for employment quality, wages are only part of the equation. Workers also need adequate work hours and stable schedules to be able to maintain decent incomes and balance work and family responsibilities. Underemployment, or involuntary part-time employment, and work hour volatility, or work hours varying week to week, are critical for understanding both worker and household income and general well-being. Together, these two components of job quality can cause workers to not earn enough and/or have unstable earnings that then diminish their ability to meet their basic needs and work towards economic mobility. In 2022, researchers at the University of Illinois Project for Middle Class Renewal, in partnership with Governor J.B. Pritzker's Illinois Future Work Task Force, developed an indicator of the quality of jobs throughout the state, named EQUAL, or Employment Quality of Illinois. This indicator is based on research comparing data collected from over 3,500 workers throughout the state in the late fall 2021. A snapshot of Illinois workers' hours, work schedules, and well-being can be understood by our analysis of EQUAL's data set. For example, we found that Illinois workers who report that they are underemployed or overemployed are less likely to report their employment quality is above average relative to those whose actual weekly work hours match their preferred hours.
30 seconds, please.
We know that these findings are disproportionately significant for Black and Latinx workers. They are more likely to experience unstable work hours compared to white and Asian workers, which continues to contribute to job disparities and lessening of employment quality. We have many good examples of areas in this country where this legislation has been introduced and passed, and employers have been able to reap the benefits of having stable work hours and stable groups of workers. I would be very happy to meet with anybody to talk about this more at another time. I've submitted much longer written comments with lots of references and lots of economic and academic jargon. I live just down the street. You guys probably know my mom, Lou Dixon. She's like, famous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Christopher Birkinshaw, then Julie Matthey.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Christopher Birkinshaw. I'm a former resident of Evanston, and I'm here representing Aloha Poke Co., an existing business in Evanston's 4th Ward. I first moved to Evanston in 1999 as a student, and I worked in food and beverage ever since. and as a student, I worked a part-time job in downtown Evanston for Starbucks. It was a very enriching experience for me as I got to both earn my own way, learn the part of the workplace, but also attend school. As it pertains to the proposed Fair Work Week ordinance, my questions are as follows for consideration for adopting this in Evanston. One, has the city evaluated what happened in the city of Chicago and what were the effects, good and bad, on their work week ordinance, which, as I understand, is slightly less restrictive than the one under consideration for the city right now? Has the council or the city conducted an economic impact survey? Have they determined which businesses in which categories would be affected by the proposed ordinance, and determined and surveyed business owners to discuss with them what this would look like? In 1999, when I first moved to Evanston, there was a Burger King with a smoking section, there was a liquor store, there was a dive bar, handful of other places to eat and drink. And what I see when I go to downtown Evanston these days is a vibrant, robust, urban downtown full of retail, restaurants, bars, human services, and much more. The 15-employee threshold squarely puts this ordinance at the footsteps of small business, far different from the 250-person limit in the city of Chicago. Secondarily, many businesses, not just restaurants, but I know it most closely, have been affected by the pandemic in a very enduring way. Government aid has run off. Food is more expensive. Wages, for all good reasons, are typically higher. In my business, we enjoy extremely little turnover, but we also pay top-of-class wages and ensure living hours for our employees. I do believe the future of the restaurant industry relies on fewer, more highly paid, more highly skilled employees. What I would ask, or what I would mention finally, is that when the city of Chicago implemented its Fair Workforce Ordinance in the year 2020, a former employer of mine, who also has businesses in Evanston, asked how we were complying, and I was invited to their offices to see what the impact was. On top of the fax machine were probably 1,000, I'm not exaggerating, pieces of paper. And what they were written contracts where when a manager of a restaurant wanted to change a shift with agreement of that employee, they needed to fill out and sign that they agreed to it so that it was potbelly, wasn't then subject to fines from the city of Chicago. It was absurd. What I would say is that the impact of the pandemic endures. Businesses, including small ones who had economic injury disaster loans, are seeing premiums come due. They may have recently repaid deferred payroll taxes during the pandemic, and it's a challenging time to impose this upon businesses in Evanston. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Julie Matthey, and then followed by Ann Rainey.
Good evening. I'm Julie Mathai, co-owner of Hune Bakery. I'm here again to respond to the Fair Work Week proposal. We would strongly request that if the City Council is determined to create an ordinance like this, then it should be amended to mirror the ordinance as it is written in Chicago, which affects employers that employ 100 or more employees, or at least 250 in nonprofit businesses. Chicago also exempts restaurants with more than 250, with less than 250 employees. Evanston's has 15 or more in the proposed ordinance. As small business owners, we work directly with our coworkers every day. It is not an us versus them mentality. We are in the trenches, not in an ivory tower. Go to any small business in Evanston and you will see the owners working side by side with employees because we care. We care about our business. We care about our staff. We want to retain good people and provide everyone who works with us a collaborative and positive environment. So I would respectfully ask that you answer the following questions this evening in your discussion. First, why is this ordinance proposed here in Evanston? What is the tangible data that indicates it is needed for small businesses? Have employees asked for assistance from the city with respect to hours and scheduling? I would love to see the evidence of this type of oversight and know if it's really needed in the Evanston small business community. Second, I'm not understanding why the city is exempt from the requirements of this ordinance. It would seem reasonable and equitable for the city to be held to the same standards expected of small businesses. And thirdly, why again are you guys not reaching out to small businesses or employees to discuss an ordinance like this that has such far-reaching implications for both owners and employees before proposing this type of ordinance? We really welcome the opportunity to work collaboratively with city council members to solve problems and address issues that are affecting our community. There is just no way that small businesses can meet the demands of this ordinance as it is currently written. Not only are the rules of the ordinance impossible for us to implement financially and administratively, as was just mentioned, but it also pits employers against employees. It also doesn't make sense right now. Participation in the workforce is still well below pre-pandemic levels. We all struggle with hiring and retaining people. We have all worked exceedingly hard to keep our small businesses open and viable during the pandemic. We've taken care of our employees and served our customers under extremely challenging conditions. Small business is the backbone of this country and this city. Small businesses are the ones that keep hiring people, not big businesses or tech companies. They're the ones laying people off right now. If you install this ordinance on small businesses, the majority of us will have to reduce staff, reduce hours, and some may even close their doors. Then the city loses sales tax revenue and people lose jobs. The passing of this ordinance will be another indicator
Seconds,
that
please.
Evidence is not a business-friendly city. Policies like this hurt small businesses, which wind up hurting employees and the communities. So I urge you to reconsider the details of this ordinance and make amendments that will address the concerns of small business community here in Evanston. Thank you so much.
All right, Ann Rainey, followed by our online people, so Catherine Gotzik will be after her.
Good evening. My name is Ann Rainey, and I am a former alderman, the 8th Ward. I'm going to have trouble reading this. My printer decided not to print out today, so I'm reading very tiny print. I'm here to speak about the Fair Work Week ordinance, but I can't say any more than what's already been said, and those were my points, so I'm not going to take up your time on that. I'm going to speak on the plastic bag tax. I am so in favor of banning plastic bags, and I hope you focus on that. So please, please ban plastic bags, but do not impose a bag tax. Let stores decide if they want to provide bags or not. If they want to provide bags, set the standards as what they can provide at checkout. No plastic. Some stores already provide incentives for people to bring their own bags, and some do not. Target, Trader Joe's, and a few others give you a nickel or whatever per bag, and some don't. Some of you may go, I'm not sure all of you do, but some may go to Aldi, Sam's, or Costco, to name a few. There are no bags there. You show up there with no bag, no carton, and you have to lug the stuff out in a wagon and load up your car or get a box while you're in the store. I mean, this is not a new idea. We're not inventing the wheel here. Adding this tax is an administrative nightmare and a morale killer. Just ban the plastic and get serious about it. I want to read a few lines from section 32223, payment and collection. And I know you have two different options here, but just listen to this. Somebody here at City Hall, after somebody at the grocery store, wherever, has gathered up all the dimes or 15 cents and sent them over to the city, on or before the 20th of each month, each retail establishment must remit the full amount of the fee collected for all single-use carry-out bags provided to a customer during the previous month.
30 seconds, please.
Give me a break here. On or before the 20th of each month. Each remittance must be accompanied by a report of all transactions subject to the fee. Oh yeah, people who have the link card, they're going to be exempt at the checkout counter from the fee. Then the city manager, their designee, and must
Okay,
Get the number of bags, then,
Thank you.
then 2 cents goes to
can we
one
have,
place. All right.
so,
My
A-
point
Amy,
is, you're going to have to distribute these pennies to various departments. It's not going to be worth it.
Amy
You're going
Morton
to-
is up next, and then Eric Passett.
It's going
Thank
to.
you.
It's going to cost you more to administer this than you're going to collect. So please ban plastic, but don't impose the tax. People are just overwrought about this. Do the right thing.
Amy Morton, please, and then Eric Passett, and then we'll go to our online commenters. And please, we're 2 minutes, please.
Hi there, my name is Amy Morton, and I live and work here in Evanston. I was here to talk about about fair work in Evanston. That, Ann, you bring up such a good point, that I think it parlays into my thoughts on what's been going on. For a long time, I've wondered. For a long time, I feel like I've known that Evanston just doesn't know who it wants to be when it grows up. And it's very frustrating. I've lived in this city around the North Shore my entire life. I grew up further north. I would never have wanted to live there. I lived in the city for 25 years, and I've lived here since 2007. And there is no other place I would ever live. I choose to live here because of its progressive nature. I choose to live here because of our diversity and the fact that we are in an urban center that has academic and now even great world-class arts with the Northlight Theater Company. And still, we're bogged down with so much ridiculous red tape. I couldn't agree more with what Ann said, but more, we're a community that believes in making a difference. We're a community that believes in doing good for the world and our neighbors. And of course we need to stand up and say no plastic. That's who we are as Evanstonians, right? And then when it comes to fair work, my God, we all, I think, those who work and live in this community desperately believe that everyone needs to be treated fairly, that everyone desperately needs to be treated fairly. And especially since COVID, we have never had greater benefits. We have chosen to create great benefits for our teams, whether they're full or part-time employees, because we couldn't get employees otherwise. And we still can't get employees. And to have these rigid, insane restrictions put on small businesses is the farthest thing that is going to grow our community's belief in each other and our ability to stay vibrant and alive. Even if we had, I know I've got 30 seconds, even if we had a full, burgeoning, busy downtown area and not half of our storefronts empty, it still wouldn't be a good idea. This is something that needs to be focused on large businesses, and we as small businesses and community members need more support from the city rather than restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Eric Passett, and then we'll go to the online commenters, and that will be Karen Gotzik.
My name is Eric Passett, and I'm here to speak up against the bag tax and also the Fair Work Week. And to be honest with you, neither of these really affect me that much at all, except for the fact that, you know, as a lot of people have already expressed here, this city is getting way over-regulated. I mean, now you can say the comments on Evanston Now and all those things don't matter. I think they do matter. I think I've lived in this city for almost 35 years. I've come to the city council for almost 30 years. I mean, you've seen me a long, long time. And before this particular council, how many times did I come? Every so often when you had something to speak up against apartment buildings? That's my business. However, I care about small businesses. I mean, I was so nice to see your new restaurant open up, and I've been there, and it's lovely, you know? That's what we should be concentrating on. Not these over-regulations. I mean, if you told me, Alderman Reed, that Governor Pritzker said we're going to do a bag tax or outlaw plastic bags, I would be all for it. But as a small city, all we do is push people out somewhere else. And it's the same thing with this work week. All we do is push people somewhere else. I mean, why don't we do something to help small businesses, help small people? How about cut the parking meters in half. How about do something to help people? I think the thing with the Northwestern, I know it's a very controversial thing, is I think it's a wonderful thing is because it will help people get more employees. It'll help the businesses. This all does is just stranglehold people. And it makes people very mad. I've never seen this many negative comments in Evanston now as I've seen in the last 2 years. Never seen this many. Over so many different, and it's never positive. I've never seen this before. I've never been so angry about living in this city. And it's just, I've never seen so many reasons to come and speak up. That's enough said. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will go to our online viewers, and if Catherine Gotzik is in the Zoom meeting.
I am in the Zoom meeting. Thank you very much. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I had COVID last week, and I'm still not a good voice. My name is Catherine Gotzik. I'm the executive director of the Main Dempster Mile, which is the business district in Southeast Evanston. I first want to say thank you for listening tonight. I'm grateful for the changes in the updated bag tax ordinance that are favorable to small businesses. Like I said, thank you for listening. I'm here to make further pleas on behalf of the small businesses in my district about the bag tax and the Fair Work Week ordinances. And what I would like to say is, please slow down. The businesses in my district are aligned with you on the goals of these ordinances. Having said that, if you run a retail or restaurant establishment in Evanston right now, here's what you're dealing with. Higher costs, delayed deliveries, profound staffing struggles, and for good reasons, higher minimum wage, higher paid sick time requirement, and the most concerning of all is decreased consumer traffic. Now, I can't quantify that for you, but I believe if you did an economic impact study, or I'd be happy to do an informal one for you in my district, you would find that that is true. It is not. I said it at council a couple weeks ago, and I'm even more sure now. We have yet to see the full extent of COVID damage. We have yet to figure out what the new normal will look like. Adding more burdens to small businesses unilaterally right now is it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming and devastating. I encourage you to put some of these initiatives like the bag tax, the cashless ban, Fair Work Week, either on ice until more recovery is possible, or to prioritize fewer of them for short-term implementation and the rest for medium and long-term implementations. None of these programs is helpful if they create an existential crisis. That said, I have a couple of specific comments about the issues at hand. Number one, regarding the bag tax. The vast majority of my businesses, the businesses in my district, already comply with the plastic bag ban. And the exception might be, that I can think of is several Asian restaurants. So if a bag ban is to be enforced, it's very important
If you could please wrap up your comments.
Sure.
Yeah,
Into
thanks.
the language of the business owners. I encourage you to also consider grandfathering businesses with a current supply of plastic bags into letting them run out. Regarding the Fair Work Week, most business owners want to take care of their employees, but the ordinance is as proposed. One of them called it hostile. I take Mayor Biss at his word that he's willing to collaborate on this ordinance, and I'm here to offer my help to organize the employers in my district into focus groups or onto a task force for collaboration, and look forward to doing that. Doing so will create more buy-in and better results. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you. And is Libby Hill online?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
Thanks.
I want to say, I live in the 6th Ward.
It's hard
And,
to
I
hear,
thank you.
folks. If I may.
Can you hear me?
I think we're going to try to turn up the volume on the Zoom participants. Just a second here. Okay. Can you, Libby, can you talk?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
If you just wanted to check your mic again.
I think we're raising the volume.
My mic is
That's
on.
better.
as loud as-
It's better
if it
now.
helps any,
Thank you.
from a tactical standpoint, we can hear online, just to let you know.
Yeah, we're raising the
Perfectly
volume.
fine.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
here in the council chambers. Ms. Hill, we can hear you now, so if you want to begin, please.
All right, did you say I can start talking?
Hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks. So I live in the 6th Ward, and I'm just here to thank you all for considering the Bird City, Illinois resolution. I wanted to explain that the application is based on what Evanston has already done to qualify to be a Bird City, Illinois, including the Bird Safe building design ordinance that was the impetus for this, for our applying for this designation. I wanted to add that it's not just what we've already done, but it's the things that we can do once we have a designation. And that's the impetus for doing more things. And one example is to bring more birders to Evanston. We all know birders spend money, and they come to Evanston they'll use restaurants and so on in order to refresh themselves. So. One of the ideas that I have, for example, that would build on the Bird City, Illinois designation would be to have a map based on the Great Texas Birding Trail. It would be the Great Evanston Birding Trail. And it would it would show not only where there are good places to bird, but also where there are good places to stop and have some refreshments. So I think that there's an economic an opportunity for this, as well as just encouraging all of our sustainable natural areas. So all I wanted to say is thank you for considering this, and I hope that you all pass it tonight. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Heather Bublik. I guess that is all of our online public commenters. Just wanted to make note that we received a written public comment from the Central Street Board of Directors stating their displeasure with the Fair Work Week ordinance. We also received a written in comment from Kelly Nichols, the Senior Manager of Policy and Advocacy for Respiratory Health Association, opposing the cannabis lounges. And we also have another, then we also have a written statement from Dr. Ziegler. So given that.
Excuse me.
Are you?
I did submit a request to make a public comment, and I got confirmation of it.
What's your name, sir?
Jeff Green.
Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Thanks. Good evening, committee members. My name is Jeff Green. I'm a member of Evanston's Citizens Climate Lobby, and I'm here to speak in favor of adopting the sustainability staff recommendations, prohibiting single-use point-of-sale and non-compostable plastic produce bags, and on implementing a tax on all single-use point-of-sale bags in non-restaurant chain retail establishments. The staff recommends further that these changes be implemented on April 1st of next year. So why am I in favor? Plastic bags degrade into microplastics, ubiquitous pollutants found almost everywhere on Earth. Scientists have detected microplastics near the peak of Mount Everest and in the Mariana Trench, 7 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Now, here's another part of the problem. I'm part plastic, and so are you. And so are newborn babies, who evidently now have plastic in their meconium, which is their very first poop. They get it from their mother's placenta, which is part plastic, and their mom's blood, which is part plastic. Now, my memory isn't as good as it used to be, but I don't remember anybody asking me if that's okay. Did anybody ask you? Probably not, and yet here we are. Somehow we've been led to believe that all these single-use plastic bags, the plastic knives, the forks, the sporks, and I love sporks, the throwaway plastic water and soda bottles are a cheap, easy solution to so many problems. But now I'm wondering, how cheap and easy would it be to get the plastic out of my body, out of the air I breathe and the water I drink, out of the burgers I eat, out of my children's and grandchildren's bodies? Did I agree to this trade-off? I don't think so. And yet here I am.
Mr. Green, if you can wrap it up, please.
Now, businesses in Evanston didn't create this catastrophe. They're not to blame. And taxing or eliminating their plastic bags won't suddenly end global plastic pollution. But it's a necessary step in the elimination of this pollution, a step that says to our residents, no, this is not okay. Thanks.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of public comment.
Now, I hate to speak up, but I've also been waiting to make a public comment. I'm Susan Lambert from the University of Chicago and had coordinated today to make some comments on the Fair Workweek law.
Excuse me. I think we're going to have you speak when we discuss HS9.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be with you in just a second.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that is the official end of public comment. We have a small change in the order in which we're going to tackle these tonight. So we're going to start off with HS9, Ordinance 24023, establishing Evanston's Fair Workweek Ordinance.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, and at this point, I'd like to open the floor up for discussion. Councilmember Reed.
Yes. Thank you for opening the floor to discussion. So we have with us Susan Lambert and Mayor Biss to also discuss this. This is a referral that I made a while ago. I've worked very closely with Mayor Biss, with Allison Lepsinger. We've met with researchers and other municipalities who have implemented a Fair Workweek ordinance. As was said, the main goals of the Fair Workweek ordinance are to ensure that workers have the right to rest, which means that they have 11 hours between shifts. So that means you can't end a shift at 11 o'clock at night or midnight and have to report back at 7 a.m. in the morning. Workers would have the right to rest. Workers would have the right to request additional hours, and they can't be retaliated against for the requesting the right to additional hours, requesting the right to rest. This gives workers the opportunity to take, before an employer would be able to hire additional employees, they'd have to offer those additional hours to employees that want to work full time. So it's the opportunity to work and the opportunity to access work. It's the right to predictability, right? To ensure that employers are giving their employees schedules 2 weeks in advance, right? So a mother can schedule parent-teacher conferences, or a father can schedule taking their children to the doctor or to other visits. And so we need to give folks a predictable schedule, and so folks know that they will be able to make do and pay their bills. And so if those hours are then taken away, the requirement here is that folks would be compensated for a portion of those hours to ensure that they receive this. And so I'd like to bring in some of our experts. I don't know if Mayor Biss wants to.
Yeah, I think Mayor Biss would like to speak on this subject a little bit.
And then afterwards, I'll have a few questions for Susan Lambert.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for your indulgence. I'll be really quick, but I just wanted to kind of share a few thoughts about this. First of all, thank you, Councilmember Reed, for making this referral. I do think this is an important issue of justice. You know, we're living through a time where there's an incredible child care crisis, and this is a proposal that gives workers flexibility so they don't have last-minute changes, for instance, in their work schedule that could make child care impossible or unaffordable. That we have a crisis, we're told by physicians, of sleep in this country that's taking away our attention and our capacity for empathy, and the way in which this proposal would affect what's called clopenings, obligations of workers to both close and then open a few hours later, is important for that. It does a number of important things, which is why ordinances and laws like this are being introduced and, in fact, passing in a number of communities all over the country. But I do want to say one other thing about this, respectfully, as you kind of prepare to have this discussion. There are a lot of decision points that go into designing an ordinance like this. You have to decide what businesses it applies to, both in terms of size and in terms of sector. You have to decide what employees it applies to. You have to decide what sorts of protections it provides, because there's a lot of different options out there that exist in this draft ordinance and that exist in things that have been introduced across the country. And so I think that as we move forward through this, it's really important that we make sure we have full stakeholder input. I had the opportunity to talk late last week with the directors of the SSAs as well as the Chamber of Commerce, and offered to them that from my perspective, it's important that we hear their input, that we enable their members to share thoughts about what works about this, what doesn't work about this, what should be changed about this, and that we, through the course of that process, arrive at something that provides the protections for workers that are sought, that is workable and implementable for our small businesses, and really achieves the kind of work environment that we heard talked about during public comment from a lot of different people on all different sides of this issue. I think when you have that kind of shared objective, you have an opportunity to work collaboratively and find a shared mechanism of achieving that objective. And I think if we're able to go through that process through the course of this issue, we'll find ourselves with success passing something, success passing something that works, and success passing something that enables our community to thrive. So with that, thanks very much for letting me be here, and I look forward to hearing the conversation.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Biss. Councilmember Reed.
Yes. Thank you, Susan. I'd also first just like to give you an opportunity to speak, and then I have a few questions for you based on our public comment.
Sure, thank you. I'm Susan Lambert, a professor at the University of Chicago, and I want to thank members of the Human Service Committee for allowing me to contribute to your deliberations on the proposed Fair Workweek ordinance. I have been studying employer staffing and scheduling practices and their ramifications for workers for over 20 years. And as part of my research, I've conducted randomized experiments in partnership with national retailers on interventions to improve work schedules on hourly retail jobs. And since 2017, I've studied the implementation of Seattle's Fair Workweek law by frontline managers in retail and food service work sites directly, they're directly responsible for scheduling employees. And Seattle's law went into effect 5 years ago. So businesses have some experience with it, and there's a lot to learn, I think, from some of these cities that have been doing it for a while. I do want to make clear that, as people have pointed out in public comment, these other laws focus on chains. They don't focus on small businesses. But that said, a lot of the workplaces that are covered by these laws have small footprints. And so in Seattle, the median size is 35 employees. There's convenience stores with 6 employees. There's fast food franchises with 12. And so what the work sites are, even though they're not covered by a larger company, are very much managers working with small staffs. So your agenda is full today, and I'm just going to focus on 3 findings from our research that may help you consider what's feasible and the extent to which there is actually potential to benefit local businesses through these kinds of laws. I mean, overall, in studying this, kind of the doomsday scenarios that have been raised by employers in many of these different cities during the course of discussion of these laws, they just have not occurred. So one of the first lessons that we've learned is that there is certainly a learning curve, but setting that new work hour standards is feasible. With experience, managers can and most even like, for example, posting schedules further in advance and limiting changes to the schedule. Even during the heart of COVID, Seattle managers viewed 2 weeks advance notice as standard operating procedure. It's just how we do things here now that they explained to our research team. You see, we have a law that's been in place for a while. And this was true of franchises and small work sites. They've changed the norms. And shift cancellations, which are of great hardship to workers, have been greatly reduced in Seattle and really eliminated in many workplaces. Managers tell us there's always something that needs doing. They've increased cross-training of employees, which makes their staff more valuable and more flexible. My second point is that predictability pay is emerging as a new tool for labor flexibility, which comes from our most recent research in Seattle just this last summer. As many of you know, and as many people commented today, some employers are finding it very difficult to adequately staff their workplaces. And so they're relying on current staff even more to meet business needs. Seattle managers report using the predictability premium as an incentive to current employees to be flexible. To paraphrase what they tell us that they say to their employees, you know, if you agree to work that extra shift or stay later, you get that extra hour of pay. So the change is voluntary and compensated, and both the manager and worker are happy. And that leads me just to my final point, that improving the predictability and stability of work schedules can be good for businesses' bottom line. Myself and colleagues, we conducted a randomized study at the Gap company, the U.S. retailer, on a multi-component intervention to improve work schedules in multiple ways. This was a randomized trial, which is the gold standard for research, and the study included stores in the broader Chicago area, including your area. And what we found is that improving work schedules for employees resulted in higher sales, but as importantly, rather than increasing labor costs, improving employee work schedules lowered labor costs. And our data allowed us to show how this happened, and that was that improving schedules by making those start and end times more predictable and stable, it reduced tardiness and call-outs, which in turn reduced what we call paper cuts to the labor budget, where one employee may be 2 minutes late, but a coworker stays 5 minutes longer to cover. And these costs cascade throughout the day and across weeks, and they add up to significantly increased outlays for labor. So I just wanted to say that, you know, when we look at the implementation of these laws in other cities that have been doing it for a while, there's pretty rigorous evidence that the types of changes included in the proposed bill can provide new tools for managing business and for managers trying to reduce their labor costs, or at least it's not adding to the costs in ways that many people feared before those laws were implemented. You know, and these laws, you know, so that happens while also benefiting, of course, struggling workers. So, you know, those are a few points I've pulled out, and I just want to say I'm more than happy to, you know, talk to committee members and also the business community about, you know, what we see on the ground in different cities that have these work week laws.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Reed with a few questions.
Yeah, a few questions, and certainly want to open this up to my colleagues. Susan, can you go a bit deeper into how this is? One of the questions was, how has this impacted other communities and their local economies? And I think from what you just said, it's been a net positive, but can you go a bit deeper into that for the business owners that are here? And maybe talk about the impact on smaller workforces or smaller teams?
So I cannot say anything about the larger impact on the larger communities. No one has done that research yet. And so and certainly as researchers, we don't want to oversell the knowledge that we have. What we want to do is say what we know and what we don't know. And we really don't know that. What we do know from both studies looking at how it affects workers and how it, and kind of how business people implement it is that does everybody comply, all the business people 100% of the time or 100% of the businesses? No. But within each industry, at least in retail and in food service and in hospitality, in the same places with the same labor market, often right around the corner from each other, there are managers who consistently implement the law in ways that are positive for both the business and their employees. And so that we have fairly, kind of good, good data on. And so I think the question of whether, certainly the question of whether what's the capacity of small businesses to implement these laws, I think is of something that the city and all cities should consider. From the employee side, of course, your need for stability and predictability and adequate income doesn't depend on how many coworkers you have or how big your business is. And so finding a way to balance the needs of small business with the needs of workers who work for small businesses is something that, that Evanston may be able to show some, real leadership on, because many other cities are struggling with that issue as well.
Thank you. And maybe if I can redirect my first question, about the broader economic impact. Certainly for the businesses that have implemented this, at least a subsect that you've studied, you showed an increase in sales?
Well, that was not the law. That was an intervention that myself and colleagues did that mirrors very much the components, or at least the targets of change that are in the laws. So 2 weeks advance notice, providing additional hours to people to increase it, increasing the stability of start and end times. We had a 7-component intervention that we tested, and it was, what people might consider to be quite complex. But overall, what we learned is that increasing the stability and the predictability of workers' hours, right? There was a fear that when you do that, it restricts managers from being able to change, right? When demand changes, right? And when business surges above more than what you anticipate, or it's not as much as you want. And what we found is that those surges and shortfalls are really small, and that there's just so much more stability in many businesses that is not being passed on to workers through, scheduling practices, that their hours vary much more than, for example, traffic in stores varies. And we show that graphically. I'm happy to share some of the cool charts we have on that. But the idea is to pass the stability that's already in the business on to employees. And when you do that, the employees stay, and they're more productive, and labor costs are reduced.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I'll close with this. It's and then certainly happy to hear discussion and respond to that. But this has been demonstrated in some of these trials to have a positive impact on the business and on the bottom line for the business. We certainly know that this has a positive impact on the worker. And as we're talking about coming out of COVID, and we're talking about the impacts on, for example, the business community during the COVID epidemic, what about the impact on human beings, on people, the workers who have to work day in and day out, and the mental health toll that the pandemic has taken, plus not having a predictable schedule. And so this ordinance is good for business. It's wonderful for workers. It makes Evanston a more inviting place to work. It means that we'll have more productive workers here in our city, and that's a good thing for Evanston. That's a good thing for businesses. And I really, I genuinely asked the businesses who came out and shared opposition to this, what is it that you're opposed to? Are you opposed to not being able to force employees to cloak in? Are you not supporting giving your workers predictable schedules? Are you not supportive of giving your workers a right to rest 11 hours between shifts? Are you not? Are you opposed to, before you hire someone else, that you offer those additional hours to existing employees? What is it in this ordinance that you are opposed to? And we had a public comment section. This is rhetorical right now, and no one shared exactly what they were opposed to. Which of the provisions of this ordinance? Well, maybe someone else heard it, and then they can address it in questions. But I did not hear exact. I heard broad opposition, but not exact sections in the ordinance that folks were opposed to. And so, I'm looking to hear that, and I'm looking to continue the conversation. And really hope that we can lead on this with the research and putting people first and ultimately our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I guess going first to the question of what exactly in the proposed ordinance is of concern to our smaller businesses, I would suggest that we, I don't know if we create a task force or a process to meet with the business owners. We meet with the SSA leadership to identify exactly what are the particular concerns. From my looking at this, I was surprised that we are applying it to businesses of only, 15 employees, whereas most of the fair work laws around the country seem to be aimed at much larger workforces and particularly chain stores. And so I guess I'm a little mystified about why we are zeroing in on such small businesses. I mean, some of the things in the ordinance I think are really good. Obviously, offering additional hours to the part-time employees so that they can work towards becoming full-time employees. So there are a number of good points in this, but I really think we need more conversation with our small business community in particular to see to really make this work for everybody.
Okay, we have Councilmember Burns online.
I just appeared.
You just appeared.
I'm not going to say much now because I really want to flow with the conversation because sometimes it's lost. So I'm going to go right after what Councilman Ravel said. I guess what I want to be clear on, at least this is how I process things, just because another city didn't do something, that's not reason alone not to do it here. Right? Like it may suggest that they found some problem, some issue, but I would say it's incumbent on all of us out here to investigate that so that we're not just saying that's the reason why we're not willing to, go forward with this. So again, I really truly think it's incumbent on us to do the research, to do the work, to figure out why they didn't do it. And there may not be a good reason. It could be political pressure. That could be it, right? But let's do that investigation. I too would like to, and I may have missed it, I was online, but I too would like to know very specifically what changes the business community is seeking. I'll also say, and this is probably something we should do, we should probably just have a way to do this moving forward because I feel like every time something comes up, we do this dance where council member, whoever meets with some business, businesses in the community. And I know Mayor Biss was also involved, and they do research, and then they find a researcher in some place to come in and provide a hearing, and then it's never enough, right? Because it's hard to hear from everyone. And so what I would also ask city staff is that we just come up with a clear process when it's something that is, that obviously this doesn't satisfy, because this is the process, right? We hear oftentimes people come up and say, well, why haven't you heard from us? This is the opportunity, right? We have a Human Services Committee, it has readings here, and then it moves on from there. And I believe this was also, did this go to Economic Development Committee? I know Plastic Bag
Not
did.
the ordinance, but a discussion months
Okay.
and months ago.
But that is the process, right? This should start at economic development, and then it works its way up. Economic development, I believe, reports directly to council, so there's no real difference between it going there to here, but this is the process. If that's not sufficient, we should probably come up with another way to do this that automatically includes and incorporates business feedback. I'll end there for now. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thanks. I guess I'll weigh in. I think maybe I was a little bit naive. I was surprised at the how negative the response to this was. I know a lot of the businesses, you talked about how closely you work, especially in a small business. I'm sure you work closely with your employees. I'm just curious. I would like to find out more about what a typical scheduling time is that, from an Evanston restaurant. I personally don't think like these regulations are so restrictive that, I think folks should have 2 weeks notice on their schedule. And I would be surprised if, I'm also struggling to find out what the sticking points are. So I think I don't know if this would be because I think what happens too is as someone who is new to this whole process, and this is a process, I think the schedule and cadence of when changes come through and how quickly or not quickly. I think for us, it doesn't seem that quick, but I know not everyone is checking our website every week to see what's coming down the pipe. Maybe a constructive thing to do would be to maybe table this or no? No? Let's see. Okay, well, I'm just saying as a possibility. This isn't the final decision on this. This would, if we pass tonight, it would go to council, and it had 2 meetings in council, and this is the beginning of the discussion, but we can hear what I see Councilmember Reed's light is on, so I'll pass the mic.
Thank you. Yes, I would urge us to move this forward to council, and then between the several readings at council, we'll have plenty of time for discussion. But again, so forgive me, I did hear one contention with the ordinance as drafted, which was just to exclude small businesses. But that was the only contention that I heard raised. But what is it in the ordinance specifically? Which one of the provisions is it that folks don't want to have to follow? And that's what I'd like to hear, and not just that we want to exclude small businesses because it's too onerous on them. It's too onerous on workers. What about the the many employees that work at a business and have to be submitted to some of these unfair practices? So I would urge us to move this forward. And then in the meantime, we'll have plenty of opportunity to continue to meet with and hear from our small businesses to hear specifically which provisions are sticking points for them. Thank you.
Then I had Councilmember Revelle.
Well, I think that we ought to hold it here in this committee and work on it more, because there are still a lot of questions. And in addition to what size employer this should apply to, I guess I have a question about the covered industries. I mean, I notice ours includes childcare workers, and so we've heard Mayor Biss saying we have a childcare crisis for our workers who need to provide childcare for their children. I think about our childcare centers, and they need to take care of the little kids who show up every morning. So I'm I'm conflicted here. So I guess I'd like, in addition to looking at, talking with our small business community about, what specific concerns there are, I'd like to make sure we've touched base with the different industries that we're planning to cover with this.
Councilmember Harris.
I think I concur with Councilmember Ravel. I don't want to pass something to council that's still contentious. I'd like for us at council to be able to deal with it and talk to the businesses, hear their side of view. Doesn't mean anything's going to change, but I'm very clear about having people have their voice. So to have those discussions before it gets to council, when we get to council, we can make decisions and move forward.
Councilmember Burns.
I was just going to say, I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, if this process doesn't work, we need to come up with another process. If people are generally fine with this process, then one thing we could do, as has been suggested and I support, is to hold it here to allow for that discussion to take place. Hopefully we can identify how that will look. Councilman Ravel, I believe you made some suggestions, but again, part of the process is our ability to hold things here to hopefully get some more input, and hopefully we can identify what that looks like. But yeah, I think we need to go further than just we need to exclude small businesses. I think we need to know why. I think we need to know exactly what the pain points are. Some of the things I heard, we also heard when the last previous council was passing minimum wage, which Councilman Rainey may remember. There was a lot of small businesses that came out, some of which I know well and most of us know well, who were saying that that too would affect small businesses. And of course, that was something imposed by the Cook County, and so we didn't have much ability to make small amendments. But I would say, at least where I'm sitting now, always happy to change my opinion if new information was provided. But if minimum wage was good for small and big businesses, I believe this is too. If fundamentally we really are talking about advocating for workers, who I also would like to hear from. So that's the last thing I'll say. In between this time, I would love to hear from workers. We just do not hear enough from workers. And many of which I'm sure are working right now. I'm sure if you looked at the research, it'd say that most hourly workers are more likely to work evening shifts. And so their voices are not being heard at all. And we should hear from them, some way, somehow, about how they feel about this. Because I think that what the research is pointing to is that they may like this. This actually may help attract more business employees back to retail, potentially, right? It's worth considering. So, but yeah, I would love to figure out how we can have further discussion, more than fine holding this here or tabling it here for further consideration.
Yeah, Councilmember Burns, you make a good point. I know there's probably a lot of folks sitting at home that, because of the childcare issues, aren't willing to jump back into the workforce just because of the instability of hours. I see Councilmember Reed has his light on.
Yeah, I will move to table this. I mean, if we want to think about a time frame, but I really want to hear the actual things. It was there, whether it's CLOPINs, predictability pay, predictable schedules, right to rest, right to hours. Which of those proposals are small businesses opposed to? And I guess, I don't know why this wouldn't apply to child care workers. And one of the points that I heard is that this should apply to us as well. That's something I'm supportive of making sure that our workers have these same rights. And so, I'd certainly be open to, or not just open to, I'd be supportive of amending this to include local government.
Hear, hear.
So I support that. And so with that, I mean, how long do we need for folks to tell us which of these mechanisms they don't like? One meeting, so I table it to the next meeting. I move to.
Well, can I just suggest, you asked how are we going to be gathering the information that we need. I guess for one suggestion would be to ask we have SSAs for all of our neighborhood business districts, and ask them to identify specifically for us what the concerns are, and so that provide us with that input in the next couple of weeks.
No, yeah, I'd love to see a list of businesses that don't support these rights for workers.
The particular issues that are problematic, and how would they fix them?
Councilmember Harris?
Yeah, I think a
Thank
month
you.
is good.
So what I'd like for us to think about is hosting a listening session where we all come to the table. It's not to pinpoint any one organization, it's to understand what the restrictions are and then how do we advocate for everyone, because that's what it's about, advocating for everyone, but doing the right thing. That's the most important aspect. So having something in place from us.
Oh, I don't know if Mayor Biss.
Mayor Biss, you want to come to the?
Just really quickly, I just want to flag, I know that I think you even mentioned it in describing the written public comment, but you know, the SSAs and the chamber were only shown the text of this, you know, I forget, Thursday or something, or Wednesday, relatively late last week. And already this morning, there was a letter from the Central Street SSA that I thought was really constructive. We may wind up agreeing with the points or may not, but they were specific, they were concrete, they were actionable, and you know, it wasn't like this whole thing has to be burned and stopped. It was, here are specific things that we would like to see changed and here are reasons. And so I have every confidence that if they're able to come up with that, you know, literally in the course of a few working days, that if we give this whatever time you guys decide is the right amount of time, we can have productive, concrete conversations with, as Councilmember Revelle said, the SSAs, perhaps the chamber, and individual business owners, as well as certainly workers, to have this not just be kind of like tense and oppositional but abstract, but collaborative, productive, and specific.
Great. Can we? Let's get someone.
Yes,
make
so
a
I
motion.
move to table this to our next meeting.
Second.
All right. Do you want to take a roll call vote, or do you want to do a voice vote? I know
Roll
Devon
call.
likes
I call roll.
Roll. Okay, roll call vote.
I want
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Revelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harry Cars?
Aye. We are tabling that till next month's Human Services meeting. So that will bring us to HS3, Resolution 11R23, registering the City of Evanston's support of the Bird City Initiative. Can I have a motion?
I move approval of Resolution 11-R-23 to register the City of Evanston, register our support for the bird to be recognized as a bird city in Illinois.
Second.
Great. I just want to go on the record, I'm a big fan of birds. So do we have any discussion? Councilmember Revelle.
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly, so the Audubon Council of Illinois just established this Bird City Illinois program just in the last couple of years to recognize communities where both public officials and residents are demonstrating an active and ongoing care and protection and conservation of birds and their habitats. And so here in Evanston, our public participation in that was approving the what do we call that? The bird-friendly building design ordinance, which is really important for protecting the birds who travel through the community. And then, of course, we have just numerous organizations and volunteers who put in just hours and hours in terms of preserving, enhancing the habitat for our birds. Particularly, of course, the Clark Street Bird Sanctuary, which is a wonderful place, and we have a number of places along the North Shore Channel, and we also have a habitat garden out here at the Civic Center. So being a bird city will really recognize and celebrate the work of these organizations and these volunteers, and I want to highlight Libby Hill, who we heard from earlier this evening. Libby was the one who gathered all the information for our application. So once we approve the resolution, that's the last step to complete our application, and we'll be good to go. So I urge our approval.
Thank you. Seeing no other lights, can we take a vote? We can do a voice vote.
All those in favor?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. All right. Moving forward, HS4, ordinance 1023, amending the city code and creating section 3222, retail single-use bag tax.
I move, so moved.
All right. And for discussion, and Councilmember Reed.
Yes, so, I'm thinking I'm going to move to table this, because rather than water down what I think is a really important, really thoughtful ordinance, I would rather us take some time to similarly think about, you know, we for those of us on the Economic Development Committee, we had a pretty good presentation from Paul, a wonderful presentation from Paul Zamilczak and the team that illustrates, you know, where we are as far as our retail vacancies and a whole host of other economic vitality indicators. And what those indicators show is that we're in a pretty good place comparatively. And, you know, you look at, you know, maybe 2017 or pre, you know, the 2008 recession, we were in a better place. And so what, you know, what metrics are we looking for? Where are we looking to get before we can make decisions that we know, as Mr. Green really, you know, really brought it down to the human level. You know, we know that we have microplastics throughout our environment. We know that it's entering our bodies, and we know that there's still more research to be done, but that it's not good to have these microplastics, you know, in our environment. And so the more that we can reduce that, you know, the better we are, the healthier we are. But to move beyond that, also, it's about keeping our community clean. We have plastic bags and paper bags and all kinds of bags blowing around. And yeah, paper bags compost at some point, unlike plastic bags. But we don't need that waste in our community, and we need to move toward a system where people are responsibly reusing materials. So I'd like us to table this for you know, 2 meetings or 3 meetings, and during that time come back with you know, really getting some analysis of what will be the right time to move forward on this. Without watering it down. So that's a motion. I move to table it for, well, we can discuss the tabling. I move to table it for 2 meetings.
Second.
Do we get, I don't think we did discuss it.
You can discuss the table.
Tabling? Okay. Oh, all right.
Just clarify, can we discuss the table?
You can.
Okay. So Councilmember Ravel.
Oh, well, I guess I was going to ask our sustainability coordinator, manager, whatever Kara's title is these days, to explain the recommendation from staff that we, I guess, we go ahead and pass a portion of the proposed ordinance, but hold off on another part. So, Kara.
Good evening, Kara Pratt, Sustainability and Resilience Coordinator. The staff proposal in your packets mentions a recommendation to, in essence, ban plastic bags in the big box stores. So this is the attempted ordinance that was before City Council and passed by City Council in 2014. And as we've all experienced, this was circumvented by the big box stores because of a loophole in a definition about the width of the plastic bags that were subject to the ban. And so the staff proposal is to rectify that loophole and then also implement a tax on the remaining types of bags at those big box stores only, and then also include plastic produce bags to be banned at the same time as the shopping plastic bags in, again, only big box stores in the immediate future. So I think April 1st, 2023 is what is in your packet. And that there's significant research that our community members had conducted in order to understand if compostable produce bags were available locally. Trader Joe's already has compostable produce bags here in Evanston. Whole Foods has compostable produce bags, not in Evanston, but in other locations. And so with that, we're confident that there's a local market to be able to purchase compostable produce bags. And so for the big box stores, we also would recommend that they make that switch sooner rather than later. And then reflective of what Councilmember Reed had brought up, we also, as staff, recommend postponing the conversation about a community-wide bag tax, a community-wide ban on plastic bags, and a community-wide ban on all single-use plastics, just for a couple months until there's more staff working with Brian Zimmerman and I, and until there's more distance from the economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Great. Thank you, Kara. Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I think I'm with Councilmember Reed in this, in that I think we either hold, or I would like to see the ban include everyone, because I've stressed this at every point. I've listened to businesses on this, and again, I have not heard one business file a complaint against banning single-use plastic bags. I just have not heard a complaint registered. And so I would not want to untie the ban on small businesses from the ban on big box businesses. I think we do that once, we do it right. We need to message around that. We need to create campaigns around it. We need to do that once. So where I am is I think we either hold it, or again, I'd be willing to include a ban on both big box stores and small businesses, and we can revisit imposing a tax on the small businesses if that's the will of this body. But I would like to see the ban include both big box and small businesses. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Councilmember Ravel.
A question for Councilmember Burns. What about restaurants?
Again, I think the ban should include everyone. I have not heard from any, and I should have said this during the last call. I emphasize workers only because they're never here, right? We never hear from the workers for many different reasons, but we hear from businesses, and that's not a bad thing. We hear from businesses, just we never hear from the workers. I meet with businesses on a regular basis in the Fifth Ward. We don't have SSAs, but we have business districts, and we have regular meetings with all of them: Seba, Hillards, Maple, et cetera. I have not heard them register a complaint about the ban. Not restaurants, not anybody. So
restaurants for carryout?
I just have not heard them express a concern about it.
Okay, well, I guess I would like to have further conversation with our restaurant community.
Yeah, and like I said, and that's why I support I think there's no real rush to do this. If we need more time, let's take it, but let's do it right.
Okay, I'll just weigh in myself. So I would be okay moving forward with the staff recommendation, just so that we have some movement forward on getting some of the plastic bags out of the neighborhood. But I'd just like to maybe hear from
And
others.
Chair, it's only because they said a few months is what I heard. I didn't hear like us pause for, and maybe we can get more clarity on timeline, but I heard a few months is what I heard. Now, if we said like a year or two, then I'd be concerned, Councilmember Hedikotis.
I would ask this body to establish a firm date when you would like to have a larger conversation about the community-wide tax, community-wide ban, and community-wide ban on plastic bags and single-use plastics, to set a firm date for that. As you all know, within the city budget, there was approval to hire 2 additional sustainability and resilience specialists, and we're still in the hiring process for that. And so the bandwidth within, Brian Zimmerman and I's bandwidth has not increased yet. And so we hope that with that increase, then we would be able to really get more feedback from businesses on how to approach this comprehensively. But as Councilmember Hedikotis mentioned, there is an existing loophole that also Councilmember Reed mentioned in the original referral that we could quite easily rectify right now.
And procedurally, if we just close the loophole now, can we have to have a new referral?
Yeah, well, we would need if we move forward with this ordinance and voted on it, there'd need to be a new referral and go through another. If I can loop back after you, Councilmember
Sure.
Cars.
You're up next, so Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I support. Obviously, I made the motion to table this because I want to get this right. And again, we want this stuff out of our environment. I fear that if we vote on this and we move it forward, we will pat ourselves on the back and think that we did something, and we really didn't do anything to move the needle very much. And you know, we need to get this out of our community entirely. And you know, from what I've seen, you know, folks are trying to make it seem like, you know, the burden on small businesses is if they're going to be lugging around, you know, carts full of dimes and nickels and pennies to transfer to the city. This is fairly straightforward to implement. You know, if we need more time to discuss this, we need more time to discuss this. I have to say that it's we have a real problem in this country with the outsized power that the business community has, and I just have to put that on the table. We put business before the health of our communities, before equity, before the environment, before every single issue, every single time. If 5 business owners are against something, we will bend over backwards to give them whatever they want. And I think we really have to evaluate ourselves on that and the power that that business community has had historically and continues to have today. And so let's take the time that we need to get this right, to be thoughtful about this. So I'd reinstate my motion to table this for 2 meetings. And I think when this comes back, it should be expanded. I think we need to look at more single-use plastics. We need to look at the plastic cutlery. We need to look at styrofoam. If we're going to do this, let's make it more comprehensive. I've heard plenty of members from the business community saying that they're not opposed to those measures, so let's add that in here, and let's bring back something even stronger than this. And let's not go back to a 2015 standard before we even had our CART plan of banning plastic bags. Let's do something that makes sense for this time.
And Chair, if I may.
Sure.
Again, we're only talking about 2 meetings. I think oftentimes when we pass something, we have, not just we, but a lot of elected bodies have the habit of looking away from the issue, and I don't want us to do that. There's still a lot here that we need to focus on. Let's keep it in front of us. Let's hold this for 2 meetings, and I think we can get where we need to be.
All right, so that's, I take that as a second, right? Oh, you did second.
Second,
Okay,
yeah.
great. So let's do a, Director Ogbo.
Yeah, just for clarification purposes, this will be tabled and returned to this meeting in April.
Correct.
Or in May? April. Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be, so the motion right now is to table it until April. Okay, let's take the roll on this one.
Councilmember Harris? Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Reluctant aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harry Curtis?
Aye. So the motion to table until April has passed. Moving along, we
Can I
have,
just make a point of clarification quickly?
sure.
Just for future reference. So today you were able to discuss the laying it on the table because it was the equivalent of postponing to the second meeting from today. But if you lay it on the table indefinitely, then it is not debatable. So I just want to make that clarification for future reference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving ahead, we have HS5, Ordinance 19-023, amending the title of Title 8, Chapter 5, Weeds of the City Code. Can I have a motion?
I move approval of Ordinance 19-0-23, amending Title 8, Chapter 5, Weeds of the City Code.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Harris. Do we have any discussion?
Well, just to remind us, this is our response to the No Mow May initiative. Basically, we're saying we would not enforce our weed ordinance until the middle of May, so people could let their grass grow and welcome bees and pollinators, so.
Okay. Seeing no other lights, I think we can do a voice vote on this one. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All of those opposed. The ayes have it. That passes. Moving along, HS6, Ordinance 20-023, amending the city code relating to the definitions and regulations of cannabis use, and Ordinance 21-023, amending portions of the city code of Evanston, Title 8, Chapter 18, Clean Air Act, smoking to allow cannabis smoking establishments in Evanston.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay.
Second.
Great. I just want to make a point of clarification. I was passed a note from Dr. Kirby, who spoke earlier in public comment. Just wanted to note that she also sent a letter and a few appendices to the committee members. All right. So I see Councilmember Reed.
Yes, thank you. I had a chance to sit down with, we didn't specifically discuss this, although we did have a conversation about this with the American Heart Association about this ordinance. We had a longer conversation about other tobacco products. I've heard public comment from folks, and I greatly respect Dr. Kirby. And I certainly hear what folks are saying, but I think, as was mentioned by another public commenter, we're not debating now the legalization or whether, folks can have cannabis. We've learned, it was mentioned during public comment that, Evanston led on the Clean Air Act, and we did, and we also were leaders in prohibition, and, that wasn't the greatest outcome of policy. And so I think what we can learn here is that by creating, I think what I'm trying to do here aligns with the values that folks are stating here at the podium. We've legalized cannabis in our state. We understand that we cannot control folks from growing a plant and consuming that plant. So that's understood. So, but we've also made it illegal to consume that plant in public. So where are people going to consume it? They're going to consume it in their homes. And in their homes, they may have children, they may have parents, they may have other folks who don't want to be exposed to that stuff. And even if it's not, and I also want to be clear that this isn't just about consuming through smoking. This is also consuming through edible means. And I think, again, Dr. Kirby would still disagree that that's, we don't want to consume THC at all. And, that's a fair point. But we also, we look at things like alcohol, which, when you look at both the health effects and the impact to public, there's a huge impact. In fact, much more of an impact on society from alcohol than there is from cannabis. But to the point of consumption lounges, for folks, you think back to the first time that maybe, you or a friend or someone that consumed alcohol. It was likely they consumed it from their parents' alcohol storage somewhere because you're keeping it at home. When you have the cannabis consumption lounges, you can keep that stuff out of your home and not have it accessible to your children and not expose your children. Sure, you can take all the measures you want to try to hide it and keep it away from children, but by creating designated places outside of the home where only folks who want to consume cannabis go, and it's in an area that is, or in a facility that has filtered air, that meets all of the standards that are laid out under state law, this is a safe place for folks to go choose to consume alcohol and keep it away from folks that we don't want cannabis around. When comparing it to cigarettes, it's legal for someone to go, outside as long as it's 15 feet away from a door and smoke a cigarette. Again, it's not legal for someone to do that with cannabis. And so if we're thinking about clean air, well, they're going to smoke it somewhere. They're going to smoke it in their house. If you're worried about the clean air aspect, at least by having more and more folks do it inside of a consumption lounge, there is more air filtration. Again, it's in a concentrated place. It will reduce the number of folks who are smoking out willy-nilly in public, who are smoking in apartment buildings, who are smoking in places that we prefer them not to smoke, and going to a designated area. So I think for the folks who have concern about this, you know, the battle on prohibition of cannabis and THC is lost here in Illinois. It's seemingly soon going to be losing at the federal level. And so the best thing that we can do is figure out how to reasonably and responsibly regulate the use of cannabis and cannabis-derived products in locations that we want that to happen in, so it's not happening, you know, throughout the community. Thank you.
Right, Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stay closely to where Councilmember Reed is. I don't think it is the right time yet to debate whether or not we want to debate like the moral issue around allowing adults to consume legal substances. I think that debate has long been over since alcohol. Like, if we want to renew that debate, great. Let's look at the amount of liquor licenses that we issue. I think we need to stop probably issuing as many liquor licenses if we're going to renew a debate about legal substances being consumed that may have a health impact. Willing to renew that debate if there's enough of a public swell to do so. I don't think there is, which is why I think I want to stay where we are with this conversation now, which is I want to make sure it's clear that this is not going to open things up so that people who do not want to inhale smoke have to, right? We're talking about a controlled environment. By statute, it has to be a controlled environment, as Councilmember Reed said, where people who want to consume cannabis will go. If you do not want to consume cannabis, you won't go there. And it's not like back in the day with restaurants where it was just like, man, it's a really good restaurant, or airplane even back in the day, but they smoke on it, right? It's not that. This is, you can't eat here in these places. By statute, they're not allowed to serve food. I don't even believe they're allowed to serve alcohol, right? So this is a place where you go to consume a plant that is legal as an adult in a way that does not impact anyone else who does not want to inhale that. That's the rules. Those are the state statute rules. And that I can get behind, right? And Councilman Reed made an excellent point in that we know this is already happening. Where is it happening? It's happening in private homes, of course, or standalone homes. Happening a lot in apartments. No fancy ventilation and air filtration equipment. Don't you think right now neighbors are being impacted by all the people who are forced to consume cannabis in an apartment? I think so, right? And so for me right now, we're not talking about, I feel like at every meeting we may issue 4 or 5 different liquor licenses, right? And I'm not saying that this, in council meeting, there should be a proliferation of lounges across the city, across wherever. We're talking about one, right? There are many places in which you can consume alcohol safely, comfortably, and where you're encouraged to do it safely and appropriately. We don't have one place yet. This is a new industry, but we don't have even one place in Evanston. So, this is something I can get behind. Again, I want to express that this is not going to open things up so that now smoke will be entering into areas where it is currently prohibited. This will just mirror state statute, which allows it in controlled environments. I just want to be clear on that. Thank you, Chair.
All right, back to Councilmember Reed.
And I just want to, drive home one point about, again, there's a point raised about dangers unforeseen, and I just really, that is the danger unforeseen. The policy as we have it right now, without having these designated smoking places or consumption places, that is the danger unforeseen, having this happen in apartment buildings and other places. You can better hold folks accountable to not smoking in apartment buildings, to not smoking in these areas where we don't, if there's a place for them to go do it legally. Otherwise, then we should just, and again, we've already learned that we can't just ban it outright, because that has not been successful. That's been had really inequitable effects. And one thing that I really wanted to raise, and the reason I flipped on my light, is also to remind us that this ordinance makes this a special use process. So it's not just that anyone gets to, come in and just open smoking lounges and dispensaries all over the city wherever they want, in the way, folks can open other businesses. each one of those applications would come before the city council, and this body would have the opportunity to evaluate that business, determine if they meet Evanston standards of being, responsible, business owners and folks who run these kinds of businesses, and see if they have a track record of doing this and doing it well. And we can approve those one by one. And so I think that's also important to keep in mind. This just gets us, this doesn't, fully open the doors. It creates a process so we can later on determine, using that process, on a case-by-case basis, which dispensaries and which consumption lounges we want to allow here. Thank you.
Councilmember Ravel.
We've talked about the people who are coming to the cannabis lounge to smoke their cannabis, and they are obviously voluntarily there and accepting, their exposure to the smoke. There are going to be workers there who may not be as well informed about the dangers of the smoke, and so there are different. I am concerned about them, but I guess I mostly appreciate the input from our public health professionals here this evening and through public comment that we've received in writing, pointing out Evanston's long history in terms of protecting, advocating for a Clean Air Act, and anyway, I'm going to choose to go with our public health professionals' input this evening, and I'm going to oppose this ordinance.
All right, Councilmember Burns.
If you care to share, I would love to know what particular point. What do you?
Well, it's just that I'm an old-fashioned, long-time believer in the Clean Air Act and protecting public health in those ways, and I'm not comfortable going back on our long history in advocating for clean air.
I don't think this does, and again, I want to reiterate that. In my understanding is because the state of Illinois still has, I think they call it, I don't know if it's smoke-free or clean air. I get mixed up on it too. They still have theirs, right? So it's still in place. This allows, what the state has done is there's an exception for dispensing organizations to have on-site consumption. So in the same way that they have not walked away from their commitment to clean air, we wouldn't be doing it either. It's just an exception for dispensing organizations now that cannabis is legal, and we now have a solution to people that were already smoking cannabis, will continue to in apartments. We have now a solution really to keep them safe too, right? They're inhaling in an apartment right now that is not ventilated necessarily, that does not have air filtration. So this is just creating an exception for dispensing organizations, which would mirror state statute. Doesn't mean we're walking away from clean air. I think fundamentally what that aimed to protect is people that don't want to volunteer their lungs to consume this. That's what it fundamentally was about, is protecting the vulnerable. The vulnerable to me are people that don't want to partake in something, don't want to be negatively impacted in something, but are being forced to. That's not happening. That will not happen with this change. And if you can point out a way it does, I would like you to do it. It does not do that. Please, yeah. Correct. Yeah. There are already examples of people partaking in this. Do I think people aren't going to continue to smoke cannabis at home? No, because people still drink at home. What I'm saying is this provides a outlet. To the better question, if you can, though, is how does this walk away from fundamentally what the clean air and smoke-free was about? How does this impact the vulnerable that do not want to partake in this, that do not want to their lungs to be impacted by this. That's what I would, if anybody genuinely can just point out how this would impact a lung that does not want to be involved in this, point it out. That's what I need that, because without that, then I don't know what we're concerned about, because we're still protecting the vulnerable. Only people who smoke cannabis will enter this establishment. You can't have food here. You cannot serve alcohol here. Why else are you there unless you smoke cannabis?
So,
Why would you work for, out of all the jobs that pay $15 to $20 an hour, which is probably all this will pay, why would you apply for a job that involves smoking cannabis? And do we think this particular job type represents so much of the marketplace that people are forced to apply for these jobs? No, they have other options.
so Director Ogbo.
Hello, everyone. Ike Ogbo, Director, Health and Human Services Department. My angle on this topic as the public health official here in Evanston is people's health. We talked about workers, not just workers, cleaners who might be cleaning these facilities, contractors who might be working in these facilities, who might not want to be exposed to cannabis. These are individuals that we also have to look at and cater to and make sure that we are ensuring that this is something that is preventable to those types of individuals. And also looking at what impact this might have on our police, right? Security matters. These are things that we'll have to take a look at as well, right? People who are driving impaired, and I also understand that we can equate some alcoholism to it. You know, people driving when they are inebriated, but there are a number of factors that we will have to consider here. And as I said, from a public health standpoint, given what we have learned, studies that have been conducted about the addictive nature of cannabis, and I also understand that individuals who are coming here for the sole purpose of smoking cannabis, but we also have to think about individuals who do not want to expose, and as I mentioned, the workers, the contractors, the cleaners, individuals who are coming there. So we have to think about their health if we are to ever consider this ordinance.
Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. I am opposed. I've received emails, I've received calls, and I just think that while it does not, you have to go there if you wish to participate, I think it still is counterproductive to the Clean Air Act, smoking, just in general. We're saying you can't, see, even my phone agreed with me. I just think it's counteractive, and I don't support it. I don't think it's the best change in the ordinance that our city can make. I think we have other issues, and it's health issues as well, so.
All right, we have a lot of lights here. I think back to Councilmember Ravel.
I was just going to try to respond to Councilmember Burns, but if I do, I know you'll respond back, so I think I'm.
I probably won't. I mean, I still have not, and appreciate our health director, I just have not heard anything yet. I mean, we're talking about 3 workers or 2 workers that are going to work for.
I'm not trying
we
to
can regulate around
I'm
that.
not trying to convince you. I'm just explaining that I'm going to be voting no.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Can I go, Councilman Reed, or are you going to go? You're up next.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, I think it's important for this debate or any other debate to just register real concerns. It's really important that if we're going to debate up here, that we're not just going off of feelings and perceptions, but that we have concrete. I mean, please take the mic if you can. Like, I want to. I'm not talking about, again, if we want to renew a question of our moral compass around this issue, we can renew it not just for smoke but for alcohol.
No, okay, yes, you're bringing up something very interesting. Alcohol's been around forever. Prohibition didn't work because once you've given people something, taking it away doesn't work so well. you got to do it, you got to not give it. There's a big difference between legalization and decriminalization. We should never have legalized marijuana, but we should have decriminalized it. In Portugal, they decriminalized drugs, and it worked very well. Okay, this isn't a moral thing. I mean, the clean air thing aside, I haven't thought about it much. That's not my shtick. My shtick is brains. My shtick is young people. My shtick is putting something out there, just like tobacco was, that it was put out there by people who wanted to make money, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to make money or start a business. But it was put out there. There were dangers. Some people knew about them, other people didn't. It was marketed very effectively. Lots of people picked it up thinking it was harmless, and it caused a lot of damage. And only now are we trying to clean up that damage. Plastic is another one, right? It was the great gift a long time ago. Here we are.
And can
So
you apply
I'm
that?
not-
Because can you apply that to this situation?
Yes, because once you have a bar for smoking weed in your town, and even more in a college town, you know, you've got a place for people to, you know, maybe I don't get invited to a lot of parties where people are smoking weed. Maybe I don't want to go to the dispensary to buy my own weed. But at the spur of the moment, I can decide, oh, cool, I'm going to go to that place and maybe I'll meet somebody and I'll hang. And then you start getting, you make it easier and easier. The easier you make something, the more people will do it. And if it's dangerous, well, you don't want to make it easy. So, yeah, the cat's out of the bag or the horse is out of the barn. Marijuana's legal. Okay, fine. But you don't have to let the horse out of the pasture. You don't have to let the cat out of the house. I mean, I think it needs to be contained. So, you know, I have no moral objection to it. It's concern about health.
Okay.
Can I jump back in,
Yeah, yeah.
Councilmember Burns and Chair?
I'm going to let the chair decide what happens next.
Sure. You can chime in, sure.
I think you're talking with forked tongues. Of course, cannabis is legal in Evanston. Then you say the only place that they can smoke it is in a lounge. Okay, that doesn't make sense. Nobody is going to be, you really can't require a person to only smoke it in a certain place. And it's not going to happen because
That's
a
what we're
lot of
doing now.
people are not going to be willing to, well, that's what I'm hearing. That go there and you won't smoke it at home. Go there and you won't smoke it on the street. That's not going to happen. You're talking with a forked tongue. To have it in a lounge means that it contaminates the air, and that's what we're talking about. You can't get rid of that. You can't go around it. It's not a moral issue. It's a public health issue.
Okay, so we're just, if I may, are we talking about the air inside of the facility or outside the facility?
We're talking about the air in the lounge. We're talking about
Lounge.
the air in the lounge. That's what
Okay.
we're talking about.
Contaminating people who are in the facility. That's what we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah. That's what happens, with people that either do something detrimental to their bodies. Yeah, that's what happens.
But you understand these are people that in the same way they go to
But you
brew
cannot
pubs right
require
now.
them. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Quick question, ma'am.
You cannot require people to only smoke there. They're going to smoke other places also. So
Understood.
listen to what you're saying. You want to have it. You want people to go there, but they don't have to go there.
I'd like
That's
to
not
call
their
the question.
responsibility. Okay, thank you
I mean,
for the time.
let's not allow people to speak if we can't engage. That's
I understand.
disingenuous.
Can I be recognized?
If we can't respond, I won't respond. But I would like to, if we offered a break from normal decorum to engage with our audience, I'd like to continue that, or let's just not do it then next time.
Okay. I think I have two lights, so Councilmember Reed.
Yes, thank you. Again, to respond directly to that, and then I want to move to something else. But right now, the law is right now that you can only consume in your private residence. That's the law as it currently stands. So we already have a standard that says there's only this one place that you can consume, and it's a place where you could be. I don't know if you live in an apartment building, but if you live in an apartment where, if you live in a home, or other people who live in apartment buildings, they are then exposed and forced to be exposed, because that's the only place that people can legally consume this, exposed to that smoke. instead of creating an outlet where more and more people will choose. I'm not a drinker. I maybe have a glass of alcohol once or twice a year, maybe. And I don't typically buy alcohol and bring it into my house. I may only have it when I go out. If bars weren't available, maybe I would buy a bottle of alcohol and keep it in my house and maybe drink more. I don't know. But so again, by creating this place where folks can go that is regulated, and again, the point raised about, who are the folks that are impacted? It's the cleaning crew. It's the, people who come into the business. The same thing in someone's private residence. If you're consuming cannabis in your private residence, there are people who may have maintenance workers and other people who may have to come in and out. And again, they're being exposed to it instead of this one regulated place where we can likely more and more people will choose to go and consume there rather than consuming in their private residences. I was trying to get let into the Zoom meeting so I could share my screen. I don't know if anybody has access to let me in, but what I have in front of me is, have I just been let in? I think I have. So I will actually share my screen.
Recording in progress.
I'll turn that down. And I want to share. Oh, is my screen still sharing?
I think we.
Chair, if he's
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, we can.
Sure, go ahead.
Because this was going to be my response. The reason why I really wanted to hone in on who we're talking about, which we're talking about people that have chose to enter this space who consume cannabis. So I know some people may still be talking about that group, but I think most of us are not as concerned about somebody, an adult, that volunteered to go into a place because they are a part of a community that chooses to take it easy and kick back using this legal substance. So we can't be talking about them. I know some folks still are, but that can't be who we're talking about. So let's put that to the side. If we're talking about a few workers, okay, probably 2 or 3 workers that could be impacted, that could be addressed through the special use process. That's what the special use process is for, right? To talk about, okay, well, how do you, if workers are going to be impacted, how can we make sure that workers are safe who work here? And you impose things on the business owners, right? That's on the business. You say, okay, well, in order for you to hire workers in these type of establishments, you need to put these measures in place to protect this group. That's what will come out of the special use process. So I'm not hearing enough about how, again, there was a lot thrown on the wall, but I thought fundamentally we're talking about the Smoke-Free Act, which, again, this would not impact. This still is not going to expose people who do not want to be exposed to cannabis smoke. And to me, that's what the Smoke-Free Acts really aim to protect.
If I can.
I will jump in for the first time here. I think I said it at the last meeting. As long as there is like adequate high-tech filtration system that doesn't adversely affect staff, I don't see any problem with this. I know we have Councilmember Harris has
if I can reclaim.
I was going to say, to Councilmember Harris' point, let's call the question. I think I'm counting to 3. So,
yeah, I do. If I can quickly just wanted to share this.
Well, I heard I had 3. I know how to count. It sounds like we've got 3.
All right. If I can share this quickly, sorry I can't make it bigger because if I turn my screen on the side, it.
So then it's not worth
Hold
doing
on.
it.
Well, folks,
We're going to follow Robert's rule. The question has been called.
The question isn't. You didn't have the floor. You weren't recognized. For
Yeah, I
following
was.
Robert's
I
rules.
recognize.
She did.
Yeah.
I was.
Well, let me
Thank
just.
you. Nope.
Just-
Nope. He got
You're
what he
taking
wanted.
more time than.
Nope.
The chair has
Let's
move on.
Let's.
Let me, Chair. I just asked that I can share this.
You can't even
Well, we
see
can't
it.
even see it, though.
Folks can
So,
go
I
back
mean-
and see it. It's folks who are online can see it, and
Why don't you just talk about
it's
it
very,
really quick?
yeah, I'm going to talk about it. But just what you can see at the top there is the top line is alcohol. What this measures, this is a DJ King, L.A. Phillips a study from 2010 that shows the health impacts of different controlled substances. Alcohol is that top bar, has the largest societal, both health, when you combine all of the different impacts, largest impact. Cannabis is about midway through, and you look at some other substances that are lower on the list. And so my point being is just the hugely outsourced, outweighing impact of alcohol on folks. Cannabis is much lower. I'm looking for us to move forward. Thank you.
Okay. We are ready for a.
We're good, Chair.
Take
Thank
the
you.
vote. So if we can take a roll, we'll need a roll call on this. We should call. If we follow, okay, if we call the question, so take a vote on the call the question.
You need a second.
Or and that can just be removed because we're
Yeah, can
ready
we
to
just-
vote.
You ready to remove it? Yeah, well, let's just.
Okay, all right. So roll call vote.
Councilmember Harris?
No.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris Harris?
Aye. Right, that passes to council, and that, again, just to iterate with people, this is allowing the possibility, this is a special use, so, okay. We're going to HS7, Ordinance 22023, amending the City Code of Evanston, Title IX, Chapter 4, Section 5, certain animals prohibited to allow roosters for educational purposes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Do we have any discussion on this?
No, I think we're ready. Come on, man. You want to talk about the Roosters? We don't need
Director
to talk about the
Ogbo?
Roosters. Let's pass this.
As I was taking a further look at at the ordinance, actually this morning, I will recommend that as it travels to City Council for us to make a slight amendment to this ordinance where it says educational institution to exclude residential areas or individuals who are perhaps homeschooled. We don't want any confusion. Yes, we don't want any confusion.
So I was hoping to homeschool myself and get a rooster as a chicken owner myself. Okay, that so noted, and we can definitely do that before we go to council.
Yes, and I agree with that. I didn't even think of the homeschool aspect, so thank you for that.
All right, I think this one is something we can have a voice vote on. So all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. So shout out to Tyrone. He's going to be sticking around at the high school. Great. Now we'll move on to HS8, Ordinance 23023, amending City Code 729B, 4th of July Parade Parkway Regulations to include all parades held within the city of Evanston. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Okay. We have it seconded. Any discussion?
I guess
Councilmember
no
Reed.
need to, if everybody's fine, if it understands what the purpose of this is, then we're good to go.
Okay, great. All right. We will have another voice vote.
So,
Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I got a headache. I thought there was some discussion, and I can't remember from the city's perspective. Do we have anybody who could speak to that? Yes, no? Maybe I'm, okay. Okay.
Okay. I think we had ironed out all the details. So we will do another voice vote on this one. So all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All of those opposed? The ayes have it. So 4th of July passes. Okay. That brings us to items for discussion. So HS10, the ECHO Evanston Community Health Outreach Program. And I saw before that we had Chief Polyp here. And I think he's coming to the podium. Thank you, Chief. Thanks for your patience. Motion for discussion. Okay, moved by Councilmember Revelle, seconded by Councilmember Harris. So Chief Polyp.
So I guess I'm going to need a little direction on what questions you would like answered. And good evening,
Okay.
and thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I think, and so based on discussion, this was something that the ECHO program was a pilot back in 2019, something I was.
Yeah, I can give you a quick history.
Yes,
of
a
what
quick
ECHO
history
was.
would be great.
Sure. So the ECHO program started with the Evanston Fire Department paramedics working with St. Francis, revisiting patients who had went to the ER, and St. Francis had a liaison who would identify patients who might need a revisit after a surgery, after some kind of medical visit, so they wouldn't re-enter the ER before 30 days. St. Francis had a foundation who then donated a certain amount of money. I believe it was about $200,000 to get the program up and running. We sent probably 13 to 15 members, firefighters and paramedics, to go through the training and become able to go to people's homes in a non-emergent way after those patients were identified as patients that needed to be seen by St. Francis. Then COVID hit, and the program didn't get off its feet. The amount of patients that we had was very small at the very beginning, but we expected that, right? Like, it's a new program, new idea, so the amount of patients that we were getting through St. Francis was a very small amount of patients. And as discussions began about, 6-8 months ago, Director, this is something that a few council members may have liked to revitalize. So that's why we are where we are right now.
Great. And I think I had some discussion with your staff about, I just ran into them and asked them. And it sounds like one of the things we're trying to do is kind of, they were seeing like community members, have an ambulance called when it was something that if there could have been some preventative, just check-ins happen. Now, do you think, and now it seems like you folks don't have, based on the memo, it said you folks don't have staff kind of available to do this right now?
So currently, with the conversations that we've been having with a committee that's been put together, I really think it would be important for us to really identify the problem to reinvent, or not reinvent. We have the ECHO in place. I mean, this is something in place that's just not funded at this point. But I really think it'd be wise of us to really hone in on what is the problem that we're trying to correct. Based on some of these calls in the memo, these different low acuity calls, some of those things aren't things that the fire department even handles, or even a behavior specialist would handle, right? So let's focus on what the plan would really call for, and then, of course, we could revitalize this at any time. As you asked, council member, regarding are there times that we can visit people where they wouldn't need an ambulance? I'm sure there are. It's just identifying those folks. I don't know how we would identify those folks in the interim. Like, so people call 911, we respond to whatever emergency that would be. Having that liaison or that person in the middle who would determine that we should probably go see these people and give them some care prior to that, that's a very hard. I don't know who would do that.
It almost sounds like a social work aspect, like case management, which I think
there would have
the
to be
question would be like what's the best use of our resources? And I know your staff is busy, and I don't know if that.
Yeah. So currently,
sense,
with
right?
With what we're trying to identify as a problem, and what kind of solution we would use to fix the problem, there needs to be some kind of caseworker or somebody that would identify people who would need this kind of service. And currently, I do have to be honest right now, the fire department, we're trying to get a third ambulance in service. We're taking on the lifeguards. We're in the middle of some pretty big operational ideas right now. And not to say that this can't be accomplished, but I really think it would be important if we honed in on what we are trying to accomplish. We're at your pleasure, and whatever you would need, we're there. But I don't think it's it's something that we really need to hone in on and really kind of study before we jump into this, because I think it could get quite expensive.
So, Councilmember Ravel?
Identifying the problem is our first step, because the memo mentions a variety of concerns, and different ones would require a different response. So we were talking about panhandling, homelessness, and littering. So, I mean, I don't know anybody has an idea of what we can really do constructively about panhandling. Homelessness is a whole separate subject. Littering, we have our new Street Plus program. In terms of a lot of the need for mental health response, we have Trilogy, which covers Evanston, and it has a 24/7 mobile crisis response program that I think is doing a really great job for Evanston. The ECHO program, as I understand it, was patients would already, a person would already have been a patient at St. Francis. They were the kind of person who kind of was a repeat visitor, and the idea was then to follow up and with a voluntary, free, in-home assistance to help them do a better job managing their own health, so they wouldn't have to go to the hospital so frequently. And it would be wonderful if that program could get funding again, because I guess we never did it long enough to really be able to point to whether it really made a big difference. I don't.
Yeah, I think the program, it has validity for sure.
Right.
You're absolutely correct. When we started the program and working with St. Francis, identifying patients based on who was in the hospital and who was released from the hospital, our hopes were to expand the program and be able to go to folks home who heard about the platform and the program, that we would be able to do some pre-care, so they wouldn't have to go to a hospital, or maybe we can head something off at the turn, right, before they would have to use 911 and call an ambulance. It just it never got to that point due to COVID and other aspects. But for the situation I think we're trying to focus in right now, I don't think that program is that.
Right.
Do I think ECHO has value? I do. In a different way, though.
Right.
Like in a way of identifying people who not abuse, but overuse 911 for things that we can probably help them out by a quick visit, but that number is kind of small at this point.
Okay. So back in the day when we had the ECHO program, St. Francis had a 24-hour crisis hotline. Do they still have that? Or maybe Director Ogbo knows more about that.
Not currently. We did not renew the AMIDA contract for the 24-hour crisis line, and that is due to the inception or the establishment of Trilogy here in Evanston. But it's not a contract that was renewed for this year. And keep in mind, that was a contract that we had for over 13 years, and we didn't necessarily have the numbers to support that contract, and that's why it was dissolved.
Okay, got it. And do you know, Trilogy and Peer Services had staff members at St. Francis to try to provide some of that kind of counseling, do they still do that, do you know?
It's something that I'll have to review. I'm not certain if we had members from Trilogy or Per Services amongst that group, but it's something I can take a look at and provide feedback.
Because it seems to me we have a variety of services and programs from a variety of different directions with a variety of community partners, and we can always provide more. But I guess I don't see, other than at some point maybe finding some funding to revisit the ECHO program when the fire department feels they've got the bandwidth to take it on, I guess I don't see an actionable item here.
Councilmember Harris?
I was going to say the same thing. I think our fire department, if they're saying that this is a heavy lift in lieu of the things that are happening, we have to respect that. And if we could come up with a plan that makes sense and give us some time to do that, not jump into a program that will burden the services we already have, then I think we have to hear that, figure out a plan that makes sense, and then as they recommend, they'd be in a better place in 2024 to handle this type of capacity and look where we overlap and where we gap, because if we're overlapping, then we're missing something somewhere else, so figuring those out.
If I could just respond real quick, I do appreciate that, and I think if we can find the point, the purpose, right? What are we really trying to focus on? And this year we can absolutely, we have all kinds of data on the types of calls we go on, but we could try to really hone in on different types of calls that I can get feedback from the firefighters who are responding to these calls on people that we see maybe, 5-6 times a month who can maybe just, have a person visit them, and maybe I can get some of those numbers for you in a year, and we can come up with a purpose and a plan to then maybe work with the health department together and come up with something that would work for our community. But I think right now, jumping into this right now, I don't know what we're jumping into at this point.
Because I seem, if I can jump in, so based on the memo, it seemed as though there's a question whether or not to expand it. It seems like from what you said, like the economy of scale to the intent was to kind of head off these calls for emergency services that weren't really emergency services. You all found that it was like a much smaller population that kind of repeat customers. Just thinking off the top of my head, I was curious if Director Ogbo had any feedback. Is there any of your staff that maybe has kind of similar but not quite the same responsibility with community members that might be able to pick this up?
So based on conversations that we had about reviving ECHO, it surrounded to a response to homelessness, panhandling, loitering, some social service referrals. Within the Health and Human Services Department, we have a number of social service individuals who respond to similar situations. For example, we have our victim services unit that responds to crisis situations that a social worker under ECHO might be responding to, and their responsibility is to refer counseling and to help with crisis de-escalation. So we do have some elements of that response already embedded in the department. And I also speak Chief Parlip's mind at pinpointing what it is that we will be responding to. That has not necessarily been highlighted. When the memo was drafted, we picked and chose which calls we think will fit under ECHO. And the reason why ECHO was suggested is because they already have the foundation, that backbone. And if this program is the will of the council to implement, that there's already a template to use. But we have to ask ourselves the questions: do we have those calls to spend a significant amount of money on in this response model? And the example that was given was the STAR model in Denver, which I actually had an opportunity to talk to them. They actually had to implement this program based on the number of calls and needs. And as Chief Parlov suggested, it doesn't appear that we have those calls, and we haven't necessarily, as I mentioned, pinpointed the calls that we will be responding to if this is eventually implemented.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion? No lights? So I think this, I guess my takeaway is we need some more data. I mean, I think this could be an interesting program, but we would need staff, additional staff that we don't have right now. So also, I think the question is that what are the problems we're trying to head off? And I think it's probably the data gathering mode of things. So thank you. I think since we will it's just for discussion, I think we're done with that. Thank you. And that brings us to, we have HS11, which was an item for communication, but that we did not get the updated memo for that, so we will skip that. So seeing no other business to attend to, if someone can make a motion to adjourn.
Adjournment of Human Services.
Do I have a second? All right, we have a second. We'll take a voice vote. Yeah, so we're voice vote for adjournment. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Good night, everyone.